The sprawling silence of Marcus Thorne's minimalist penthouse, perched atop one of the city's most iconic skyscrapers, was a deliberate choice, a stark counterpoint to the relentless hum of the global tech empire he commanded. At 40, Marcus carried himself with an almost unnerving calm, a quiet dignity that belied the cutthroat world in which he operated. He was a self-made man, the visionary founder and CEO of Innovate Tech, a company that had, in just over a decade, rewritten the rules of software development and artificial intelligence. His success was colossal, his influence far-reaching. Yet Marcus remained profoundly unostentatious. His bespoke suits, reserved for the highest echelons of corporate negotiation, were replaced in his private hours by simple, well-worn jeans and t-shirts. He drove an electric sedan, not a flashy sports car. His wealth was not a badge to be displayed. It was a resource, a tool, primarily channeled into ventures that sought to uplift, rather than merely acquire. Indeed, the true measure of his prosperity, in his own estimation, lay in the substantial, quiet contributions he made to scholarship funds for underserved students and mentorship programs for budding entrepreneurs from marginalized communities. He believed, with unwavering conviction, that opportunity was a right, not a privilege, and that access to education and guidance could dismantle barriers far more effectively than any overt display of power. His mornings unfolded with a precise, almost meditative rhythm that had remained unchanged for years, a bulwark against the inherent chaos of managing a multi-billion-dollar enterprise. Before the city stirred, before the first golden rays of dawn kissed the glass facades of the buildings below, Marcus would be in his private gym. He trained alone, his movements a fluid, almost meditative dance of calisthenics, yoga, and shadowboxing. There were no blaring motivational anthems, no personal trainers barking orders. Just the soft whisper of his own breathing, the quiet stretch of muscle, the focused communion of mind and body. He wasn't building a physique for magazine covers. He was forging resilience, maintaining the quiet internal strength that had carried him through countless battles, both corporate and personal. His body, lean and powerfully compact, moved with an economy of motion that hinted at a deeper, almost instinctual understanding of physical presence. After his rigorous hour, the aroma of freshly ground coffee would fill the expansive, starkly modern kitchen. He meticulously prepared it himself, savoring the ritual, the simple, tangible act of creation. With a steaming mug in hand, he would settle by the floor-to-ceiling windows, not to gaze idly at the burgeoning empire spread beneath him, but to immerse himself in the digital currents of global news, absorbing information, identifying trends, and seeking understanding in a world he strove to improve, rather than merely conquer. This disciplined solitude was his sanctuary, a crucial element in maintaining his equilibrium amidst the relentless demands of his public persona. On this particular Tuesday, however, a subtle undercurrent of heightened anticipation vibrated beneath the surface of his calm routine. Today was the day. He had a meticulously scheduled flight to London, a pivotal trip to finalize a multi-billion-dollar contract that promised to catapult Innovate Tech into an entirely new stratosphere, potentially revolutionizing a key sector of the global economy. This was the culmination of years of relentless effort, countless sleepless nights, and the unwavering belief in his vision. He dressed carefully for the journey, choosing a dark, perfectly tailored but discreetly branded travel suit that blended seamlessly into the anonymous sophistication of first-class travel, valuing comfort and discretion above all. His personal assistant, Sarah, a sharp, impeccably efficient woman in her early 30s, had handled every detail of the itinerary. She was more than an assistant. She was a trusted confidant, an extension of his own meticulous planning, understanding his preferences and anticipating his needs with almost prescient accuracy. As his sleek, whisper-quiet electric sedan glided through the pre-rush hour streets towards the international airport, the city began to awaken around them, a gradual symphony of accelerating engines and distant sirens. Just a few blocks from the terminal entrance, however, the seamless flow of traffic abruptly congealed. Ahead, on the shoulder of the sprawling multi-lane highway, a battered, aging sedan listed precariously, its front passenger side tire completely shredded, the remnants of rubber clinging desperately to the rim. A young woman, her face streaked with tears and palpable frustration, paced frantically beside the disabled vehicle. She fumbled clumsily with a jack, clearly distraught and overwhelmed by the mechanical mishap. Her desperate gestures, her disheveled appearance, spoke volumes of her distress. Marcus glanced at the expensive but understated watch on his wrist. His flight schedule was meticulously planned, every minute accounted for. Missing his departure window, even by a few minutes, could create a cascading ripple effect, potentially jeopardizing the London deal. His driver, trained for surgical punctuality, instinctively began to navigate around the stalled vehicle, prioritizing the CEO's critical itinerary. But Marcus's gaze remained fixed on the young woman. He saw not just a stranded motorist, but a vivid reflection of his own past struggles, the myriad times he had faced seemingly insurmountable obstacles with no one to offer a guiding hand. He remembered the grinding fear of poverty, the crushing weight of responsibility, the moments when a single, unexpected setback could unravel weeks of painstaking effort. His personal philosophy, deeply ingrained and fiercely held, surged to the forefront of his mind. True success was never truly measured by the accumulation of wealth or power, but by the quiet, often unseen acts of compassion and empowerment, especially when no external reward was expected. "Pull over," he instructed his driver, his voice calm but firm, leaving no room for argument. The driver, momentarily surprised by the deviation from protocol, pulled to the side of the road. Marcus exited the car, his expensive suit jacket momentarily out of place against the backdrop of an emergency shoulder. He approached the distressed woman, his presence radiating a quiet competence, a calm assurance that immediately drew her gaze. "Everything all right?" he asked gently, his tone devoid of judgment, his eyes empathetic. The woman, startled, looked up, her eyes wide with a mixture of surprise and desperation. "My tire! I don't know what to do. I'm going to be so late for work, and I can't afford a tow truck right now." Her voice cracked on the verge of tears. Without a word, Marcus knelt beside the car. His hands, usually manipulating keyboards and touchscreens with practiced ease, now worked with a familiar, almost instinctive dexterity. He quickly assessed the situation, located the spare tire, and within minutes had the damaged wheel off and the new one precisely bolted into place. There was no fuss, no wasted motion, just the efficient, quiet precision of a man who knew how to solve problems, whether they were lines of code or a flat tire. He declined her effusive thanks, her fervent offers of payment, with a simple, reassuring shake of his head and a warm, genuine smile. "Just pay it forward," he advised softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Then, with a quiet nod, he re-entered his car, leaving the woman astonished, immensely relieved, and perhaps, subtly, inspired. He was only a few minutes behind schedule, but his conscience was clear, his spirit replenished by the simple act of human connection. No one else had stopped. No one else had witnessed this quiet act of humanity. It was a fleeting, almost invisible ripple in the vast, indifferent ocean of urban life. But to Marcus, it was a fundamental affirmation of his values. Yet, subtle details, often unnoticed by the casual observer, hinted at a deeper narrative within Marcus Thorne, a story far richer than his public persona. As he settled back into his luxurious car seat, he absently touched the face of the wristwatch on his left wrist. It was an old timepiece, its face unadorned, devoid of any discernible brand, its leather strap worn smooth and supple with age. It held no intrinsic monetary value in the traditional sense. Yet Marcus often found himself gently tracing its contours, particularly when lost in profound thought or moments of quiet reflection. It was a relic, a silent testament to a journey, perhaps a cherished link to a past far humbler than his glittering present. A few, very few, of his closest confidants had noticed a small, almost imperceptible tattoo peeking from beneath his suit cuff when he moved a certain way, the stylized outline of a phoenix, its wings unfurled, poised for flight. It was a private emblem, a powerful symbol of rebirth, resilience, and triumph over adversity. It spoke of origins shrouded in struggle, of fire survived, and of a quiet, powerful transformation that had defined his very essence, unseen by the world, yet guiding his every deliberate step. This symbol, tucked away beneath his professional facade, was the silent promise of a man who had risen from ashes, forever marked by the journey, and forever ready to soar when challenged. The quiet calm he exuded was not a lack of passion, but the profound stillness of an ancient force ready to unfurl its wings. The polished marble floors of the international terminal hummed with the quiet, perpetual urgency of global travel. The air, crisp and conditioned, carried the subtle scent of jet fuel and hurried anticipation. Marcus Thorne, his bespoke travel suit a dark, unassuming silhouette amidst the brighter hues of vacationers and business travelers, approached the first-class check-in counter. His carry-on, a sleek, minimalist bag, rested easily on his shoulder, a silent testament to his efficiency and preference for unencumbered movement. His mind, however, was already a continent away, consumed by the intricate details of the multi-billion-dollar deal awaiting his signature in London. The contract was not merely a financial triumph, it represented a profound leap forward for Innovate Tech, a testament to years of relentless innovation and Marcus's unwavering belief in the transformative power of technology. He presented his passport and the digital confirmation of his first-class ticket to the airline attendant, a woman named Brenda. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair and meticulously applied makeup did little to mask the subtle tension in her jawline or the weary impatience in her eyes. Brenda, a veteran flight attendant, harbored a deep-seated and often unchallenged prejudice, a rigid mental framework that categorized passengers at a glance. In her estimation, first-class passengers adhered to a specific unspoken dress code, one of overt designer labels, flashy accessories, and an air of unquestionable affluence. Marcus, with his understated elegance and quiet demeanor, simply didn't fit her narrow, prejudiced mold. He exuded power, yes, but it was a quiet, almost invisible power, easily missed by those who judged by superficialities. Brenda was a classic misunderstood antagonist, type B. Her actions stemmed not from overt malice, but from deeply ingrained biases, a narrow worldview, and the petty satisfaction of wielding what little authority she possessed over those she perceived as lesser or simply out of place. Her expression soured almost imperceptibly as her eyes skimmed his attire, then narrowed slightly as she scanned his ticket. "There seems to be an issue here, sir," Brenda announced, her voice clipped, devoid of the usual welcoming pleasantries reserved for first-class patrons. A tiny, almost imperceptible hint of smug satisfaction flickered in her eyes. "Your seat appears to be overbooked. You'll have to take a seat in economy." She slid his passport and a generic boarding pass for an economy seat across the counter with a curt, dismissive gesture, not even bothering to offer an apology or any alternative solution. The implicit message was clear: you don't belong here. Marcus felt the familiar, unwelcome stir of irritation, a cold ember igniting in the pit of his stomach. He had navigated the labyrinthine corridors of corporate America as a black man for decades, facing countless microaggressions, subtle slights, and thinly veiled prejudices. Usually these were fleeting, easily dismissed as the background noise of systemic bias. This, however, was blatant. He maintained his composure, his voice a calm, controlled counterpoint to Brenda's brittle impatience. "Overbooked? That's impossible. I booked this seat weeks ago through a premium travel agency. I have a confirmed first-class ticket." He reached into his wallet and produced his airline's top-tier Platinum Elite member card, its metallic sheen glinting under the harsh terminal lights, a silent testament to his extensive travel history and loyalty. "Could you please recheck the system, perhaps manually? My flight is crucial. I have a time-sensitive, critical business meeting in London." Brenda merely scoffed, a tiny, almost inaudible sound of derision that nonetheless vibrated with contempt. She barely glanced at the platinum card, dismissing it as if it were a cheap novelty. "Sir, I assure you, the system is always correct. First class is full. Perhaps you should have arrived earlier if your flight was so crucial." Her tone dripped with unconcealed sarcasm, her eyes raking over his humble clothes once more, lingering on the worn leather of his travel bag. "These seats," she began, her voice lowering conspiratorially, as if sharing an insider secret with an invisible audience, "are for established clientele, for those who truly belong here, not for last-minute upgrades or those who might misunderstand their booking status." She left no doubt that she believed he didn't fit the profile of a legitimate first-class passenger, and that his presence was an inconvenience, if not an affront. Just then, a sleek, immaculately dressed figure approached the counter directly behind Marcus, a predatory smirk playing on his lips. This was Kevin Miller, the cunning and ruthless CEO of Horizon Labs, a direct, often cutthroat competitor to Innovate Tech. Kevin had been observing Marcus from the moment he'd entered the terminal, a silent, envious shadow, acutely aware of Marcus's meteoric rise, and, more importantly, the multi-billion-dollar London deal hanging precariously in the balance, a deal Kevin himself had aggressively and unsuccessfully pursued. He seized this opportune moment to inject himself into Marcus's perceived humiliation, to twist the knife. "Having trouble, Thorne?" Kevin drawled, his voice oily with feigned concern, though his eyes gleamed with undisguised malicious amusement. He then turned to Brenda, flashing a charming, conspiratorial smile. "Don't worry, ma'am. I'm sure he just made a little mistake. First class isn't for just anyone," he added, his gaze flicking back to Marcus with a condescending sneer, emphasizing the word anyone with a loaded implication. Kevin was a classic antagonist, type A. His actions were driven by a corrosive envy, a ruthless desire to undermine his rivals at any cost, and a pathological need to assert his own superiority, especially in public. He knew exactly who Marcus Thorne was, and he reveled in this unexpected opportunity to diminish him, to paint him as an imposter, regardless of his actual status. A cold, precise anger began to simmer within Marcus. He felt the familiar burning surge of righteous indignation, the bitter, acrid taste of being judged solely on superficialities, of having his rightful place denied purely on the basis of someone else's prejudice. But years of navigating the cutthroat currents of corporate America, of enduring insidious discrimination, had taught him an almost superhuman restraint. He knew immediate emotional outbursts were a weakness, a concession to the very prejudices he sought to dismantle. He simply met Kevin's gaze with an unblinking stare that held far more quiet steel than overt anger, a look that promised a reckoning, a silent challenge that unsettled Kevin despite his bravado. He then turned back to Brenda, his voice dropping to a dangerously low, controlled tone, each syllable articulated with chilling clarity. "I will ask you one last time, politely, to verify my reservation. I have a confirmed first-class ticket, a Platinum Elite status, and I expect to be seated as such. My time is extremely valuable, and any further delay will have significant consequences for both me and, I assure you, for this airline." Brenda, however, was too far gone, too emboldened by Kevin's presence and her own entrenched prejudice to heed the subtle warning in Marcus's voice. She merely crossed her arms, her chin held high, her lips pressed into a thin, unyielding line. "Sir, there's nothing more to discuss. The seat is full. You can take the economy seat offered, or you don't fly." Her finality was absolute, dripping with the petty satisfaction of having, in her mind, definitively put this unsuitable man in his place, of having reinforced her own distorted sense of order and hierarchy. In that precise, loaded moment, a profound and undeniable realization washed over Marcus. This wasn't just a simple logistical inconvenience. It was a deliberate, malicious act of discrimination, tacitly encouraged by a ruthless competitor, and executed with venom by a prejudiced employee. It was a calculated affront to his dignity, a blatant disrespect for his hard-won status, and a direct, immediate threat to his crucial London deal. The multi-billion-dollar contract, the culmination of years of tireless work, the future of Innovate Tech, now hung precariously in the balance, jeopardized by a petty act of bigotry. But it was more than just the contract. It was the crushing echo of every dismissive glance, every condescending tone, every subtle, insidious barrier he had faced as a black man, rising through the ostensibly meritocratic ranks of an often exclusive industry. He had overcome so much, built so much, pushed through so many invisible walls, only to be reduced to this, to be denied what was rightfully his by a bigoted gatekeeper. The frustration of years of similar encounters, meticulously suppressed, finally boiled over, reaching a critical, explosive point. This was the point of no return. The casual injustice, the open contempt, the deliberate attempt to sabotage his critical business had pushed him past his limit. To simply accept this, To retreat into the anonymity of the economy cabin would be to betray not just his own hard-won standing, but the very principles of equity, justice, and self-respect that he championed, that he subtly encouraged in others through his philanthropic endeavors. It would be a surrender, not just to Brenda, but to every prejudiced glance, every condescending remark, every systemic barrier he had ever faced. He would not allow this blatant prejudice to stand, not when it threatened his mission and insulted his very being. He would not just respond, he would act, decisively, strategically, and with the full, formidable weight of his accumulated influence. The time for quiet diplomacy, for patient endurance, was definitively over. The game had changed, and Marcus Thorne, the man of quiet strength, the man with the phoenix tattoo, was ready to play it on his own, unyielding terms. The storm had broken, and Marcus was its eye. The charged atmosphere at the first-class check-in counter crackled with Brenda's smug, unwavering conviction and Kevin Miller's thinly veiled predatory malice. They stood, a silent, unholy alliance of prejudice and ambition, fully expecting Marcus's frustrated retreat, a defeated figure vanishing into the sprawling anonymity of the economy cabin. Their smiles, carefully constructed facades of superiority, remained fixed. But Marcus Thorne was not a man who retreated. The quiet anger that had simmered beneath his composed exterior, the cold ember of indignation, now solidified into a diamond-hard resolve, cutting through the terminal's ambient hum. His gaze, devoid of overt rage but chilling in its intensity, swept from Brenda's insolent smirk to Kevin's preening face, conveying a silent, unshakable promise of consequences that neither of them could yet fully comprehend. He didn't argue further. He didn't raise his voice, a testament to years of disciplined self-control honed in boardrooms and through countless personal battles. Instead, with a deliberate, almost theatrical slowness that drew every eye, Marcus reached into the inner pocket of his perfectly tailored jacket. He retrieved his phone, a sleek, minimalist device that seemed to hum with latent power, a quiet sentinel of global connectivity. His fingers, accustomed to navigating complex interfaces and orchestrating multi-billion-dollar deals, moved with practiced precision, tapping through contacts, bypassing the usual pleasantries. He raised the phone to his ear, turning his back slightly to the counter, effectively dismissing Brenda, a deliberate gesture of profound disdain that stung more than any shouted reprimand. The subtle insult was lost on no one. The silence in the immediate vicinity deepened, broken only by the low murmur of distant conversations and the muffled announcements over the airport's PA system. "Sarah!" Marcus's voice was calm, almost conversational, yet it carried an unmistakable, resonant edge of command that cut through the background noise, reaching Brenda and Kevin with chilling clarity. "Cancel this flight, immediately, and arrange the private jet. I want it ready to depart for London in 30 minutes. Confirm the landing slot and ground transport. My meeting is non-negotiable." He paused, a beat of loaded silence that stretched like taut wire. "Also, I need an immediate unscheduled meeting with the highest level of the airline's executive leadership, as soon as humanly possible. Make it happen, Sarah." He clicked the phone shut, the decisive snap echoing in the sudden stillness of the terminal. He didn't spare Brenda another glance, turning instead towards the executive lounges, as if the entire interaction with her was now entirely beneath his consideration, already a closed chapter. He moved with a quiet, unhurried purpose, a man fully in control, leaving a vacuum of stunned silence in his wake. Brenda's composure completely shattered. Her perfectly made-up face, moments ago smug with petty authority, now drained of all color, turning a sickly, mottled white. The horrifying realization, cold and stark, hit her with the force of a physical blow. She had not merely insulted an ordinary passenger. She had irrevocably offended someone of immense, unseen power. Someone who commanded private jets with a mere phone call and summoned airline executives like obedient servants. Her carefully constructed worldview, where she held arbitrary sway over the fleeting lives of passengers, crumbled into dust around her. Panic, raw and unadulterated, flared in her eyes. "Sir, Mr. Thorne, please wait," she stammered, abandoning all pretense of professionalism, her voice thick with desperate apology, bordering on a whine. I can recheck." I'm sure we can find something for you. Perhaps an upgrade. A different flight right away. Please, sir." She made a fumbling, desperate gesture towards her computer, her hands trembling uncontrollably. The image of arrogant authority completely dissipated. Marcus simply looked over his shoulder, his eyes meeting hers. It was a silent, withering gaze that conveyed utter dismissal, a profound rejection of her belated, self-serving offer. "Too late," he stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion, a final, definitive judgment. He then continued his walk, leaving Brenda paralyzed by the horrifying magnitude of her blunder, her career, her very future, hanging by a thread of her own making. Kevin Miller, witnessing the entire exchange, felt a cold dread creep into his stomach, slowly constricting his chest. His initial amusement, his self-satisfied smirk, had completely curdled into genuine alarm, then a growing, icy fear. Private jet. Executive leadership. He muttered the words, his mind racing, trying frantically to reconcile the unassuming man in front of him with the seismic implications of his phone call. He knew Marcus Thorne was successful, immensely so, but a private jet on 30 minutes' notice, and direct, immediate access to airline CEOs. This was a level of influence far, far beyond even his own considerable reach and network. The man he had just publicly mocked, the rival he sought to undermine, was clearly not just a formidable competitor, but a force of nature, an entity whose power he had catastrophically underestimated. The smugness drained from his face, replaced by a calculating, desperate worry. He had seen Marcus's name in Forbes, his company's valuations, but now he realized the terrifying depth of the iceberg beneath the visible surface. He was facing a true legend returned, a man whose quiet power had been so profoundly, dangerously underestimated, and whose return to the foreground of the industry would send shockwaves through every corner. Kevin immediately pulled out his own phone, but instead of making a call, he began frantically typing, accessing his vast network of contacts, attempting to glean any last-minute information he could about Marcus Thorne's true standing with the airline, or, more nefariously, to plant seeds of doubt. He frantically messaged his own inside sources within the airline, discreetly inquiring about the looming executive meeting, attempting to undermine Marcus's credibility even before the meeting began, hoping to paint him as an overzealous, litigious troublemaker. He feared Marcus would use his newfound undeniable leverage not just to address the discrimination, but to potentially damage Kevin's own business interests, perhaps by revealing his involvement in the incident. He was the quintessential antagonist, Type A, now consumed not just by envy, but by a growing, desperate fear. His primary objective had abruptly shifted from humiliating Marcus to protecting himself from the unforeseen, cataclysmic consequences of his own arrogance. He plotted, even as the cold tendrils of panic began to tighten their grip on his once unshakable composure. Brenda, meanwhile, frantically tried to cover her tracks at the check-in counter, deleting entries from her digital log, attempting to rewrite the narrative of her discriminatory actions, oblivious to the fact that the digital breadcrumbs, meticulously monitored by Innovate Tech's systems, had already been laid, irrefutable and indelible. Marcus, however, was already several steps ahead. As he walked towards the exclusive executive lounges, his mind was a whirlwind of strategic planning, not emotional reactivity. He knew the London deal was paramount, the financial future of Innovate Tech depending on it. But equally paramount was the principle. He had faced adversity his entire life, climbed against invisible currents of bias, but this blatant, targeted act of prejudice was a line that had been definitively crossed. This was no longer just about a missed flight. It was about sending a clear, unequivocal message to an entire industry. That discrimination would not be tolerated, especially not when wielded by those in positions of power, nor when subtly instigated by malicious competitors. His personal assistant, Sarah, his indispensable helper, was already at work, a flurry of precise, silent efficiency. She was the only person, perhaps in the entire world, who understood the full depth of his capabilities and his unwavering, almost zealous commitment to justice. Even as Marcus walked, Sarah was already compiling the arsenal of evidence, meticulously pulling up airport security footage from various angles, accessing granular digital records of his original first-class booking confirmation, cross-referencing airline seat availability logs, and building an irrefutable ironclad case. Marcus trusted her implicitly. Her loyalty was absolute, her competence unparalleled. He knew that what had just transpired at the check-in counter, while a public spectacle, was merely the first volley in a much larger, more significant confrontation. The real battle, against systemic prejudice and individual malice, against the very fabric of discrimination woven into corporate culture, was about to begin. The calm exterior he presented to the world belied the sharp, strategic mind already calculating his next decisive move, envisioning the complete dismantling of the structures that allowed such injustices to persist. The legend had not just unveiled himself, he had set the stage for a reckoning. The plush, silent confines of the airline's executive boardroom, typically a sanctuary of hushed power plays and strategic pronouncements, now hummed with a brittle, almost palpable tension. This was the Jiao Truong Marcus Thorne had demanded, a symbolic arena where the casual prejudice of an airline employee and the insidious machinations of a corporate rival would confront the unyielding, quiet power of a man who refused to be disrespected. The gleaming glass table, reflecting the stern, increasingly anxious faces of the assembled executives, seemed to amplify the unspoken stakes of the looming confrontation. At its head sat David Thompson, the airline's CEO, a man whose carefully composed demeanor, usually a testament to years of navigating corporate crises, now betrayed a faint tremor of unease. Flanking him were Eleanor Vance, the grim-faced chief operations officer, her sharp eyes missing nothing, and Robert Sterling, the head of customer relations, a man whose perpetually plastered-on smile now looked more like a grimace. And there, tucked almost apologetically into a chair at the far end of the table, was Brenda, her face a ghostly pale, her eyes darting nervously between Marcus and her superiors, clinging to a desperate hope for absolution. Marcus, however, was fundamentally alone in this confrontation. Sarah, his indispensable personal assistant and unwavering helper, was a silent force working remotely, her fingers flying across keyboards, meticulously compiling the digital breadcrumbs, preparing the final decisive arsenal of evidence Marcus would wield. She was a master of information retrieval, capable of sifting through vast databases and disparate systems with remarkable speed and precision. But it was Marcus who had to physically present the case, who had to articulate the profound insult, dissect the injustice, and compel a room full of powerful, skeptical individuals to not only acknowledge an uncomfortable truth within their own organization, but also to act upon it. He was acutely aware of the relentless ticking clock. His London deal, the multi-billion-dollar linchpin for InnovateTech's next phase of global expansion, hung precariously in the balance. Every passing minute of delay, every evasive maneuver or attempt at deflection from the airline executives was a direct threat to his global aspirations, a subtle erosion of the carefully constructed future he envisioned. The financial stakes were immense, but for Marcus, the stakes of integrity and justice were far higher. David Thompson, attempting to project an air of control, cleared his throat, his voice smooth, practiced, honed by countless public appearances. "Mr. Thorne, thank you for coming on such short notice. We understand there was an unfortunate misunderstanding at check-in. Our staff are trained to the highest standards, and we pride ourselves on exceptional customer service. Perhaps a voucher for future travel, or a refund for your first-class ticket, might help resolve this matter to your satisfaction?" His tone was carefully conciliatory, designed to diffuse the tension, to placate, to sweep the entire incident under the opulent rug of corporate apology with a minimum of fuss. Robert Sterling nodded sagely, his sympathetic but ultimately dismissive smile fixed on his face, mirroring Thompson's sentiment. Eleanor Vance remained impassive, her gaze shrewd, assessing Marcus with a cold, almost detached scrutiny. Brenda, sensing a faint lifeline, an opportunity to perhaps escape culpability, spoke up, her voice trembling slightly but laced with a subtle, desperate defensiveness. "It was just a system error, Mr. Thompson. The seat was clearly showing as unavailable. I simply followed procedure." Her eyes flickered nervously to Marcus, a silent, desperate plea for him to let it go, to accept the easy out. Perhaps Mr. Thorne simply arrived too late to claim his seat. These things happen in busy airports, after all. There are often unforeseen technical glitches. A few of the less senior executives, eager to protect one of their own, murmured their agreement, casting fleeting, critical glances at Marcus, clearly viewing him as an overreacting, demanding passenger. Marcus listened patiently, his expression utterly unreadable. He allowed their practiced excuses, their carefully worded deflections, their thinly veiled attempts at gaslighting, to hang in the air, knowing they were merely setting the stage for his meticulously planned counterattack. He knew with absolute certainty that Kevin Miller, his ruthless rival, was also likely at work behind the scenes, leveraging his own illicit connections, whispering doubts about Marcus's character, attempting to paint him as an overly aggressive businessman looking for an excuse to cause trouble, to gain an unfair advantage. The subtle undercurrent of skepticism and thinly veiled hostility emanating from some of the executives confirmed his suspicion. This wasn't just about Brenda's individual prejudice. It was about the insidious corporate culture she represented and the pervasive, undermining influence of a malicious competitor. The battle was not just for a seat, but for his reputation, his deal, and for the very principle of justice. "With all due respect, Mr. Thompson," Marcus finally interjected, his voice calm but firm, a razor-sharp blade cutting through their carefully constructed narrative. This was no misunderstanding, and it was certainly not a system error. It was a deliberate act of discrimination, compounded by an utter lack of professionalism, and, indeed, a clear attempt at corporate sabotage. He paused, allowing the gravity of his words to sink in, challenging their comfortable assumptions, forcing them to confront an unpleasant reality within their gilded walls. And it was fueled by explicit prejudice and a rival's malicious intent. The atmosphere in the room visibly stiffened, growing taut with tension. The word discrimination hung heavy in the air, an unwelcome intruder in their pristine corporate bubble. David Thompson's carefully maintained smile faltered, replaced by a deep furrow in his brow. Robert Sterling shifted uncomfortably in his expensive chair. Eleanor Vance's gaze sharpened dramatically, her eyes now fixed intently, almost predatory, on Marcus, assessing not just his words, but the unwavering conviction behind them. "Mr. Thorne, that's a very serious accusation," Thompson said, his tone now tinged with a distinct warning, a subtle threat. "Do you have any concrete proof of this deliberate act and the involvement of a competitor? Our legal team will require substantial evidence if you intend to pursue such claims." He clearly expected a rant, a frustrated outburst, something he could easily dismiss as a disgruntled customer's hyperbole or a legal bluff. He was trying to call Marcus's hand, to force him to overplay his position. This was Marcus's ultimate test. He knew the London deal was precariously balanced, hanging by a thread of time and trust. He needed to be swift, decisive, and irrefutable. He couldn't afford a protracted debate, a legal quagmire, or a PR battle that could inadvertently damage Innovate Tech's reputation. He reached for his sleek, slim tablet, which he had placed silently on the polished glass table before the meeting began, its dark screen now a mirror reflecting the anxious faces around him. "As a matter of fact, Mr. Thompson," Marcus countered, his voice steady, carrying an undeniable weight of quiet authority, "I do." His fingers moved across the tablet screen, precise and confident, a master technician preparing a complex presentation. "Firstly, here is the official confirmation from my premium travel agency, dated 3 weeks ago, showing a meticulously confirmed first-class booking. There was no overbooking on record at that time, as Ms. Brenda falsely claimed. The seat was available." He displayed the email confirmation, its details stark and clear, projected onto the large screen at the front of the room. "Secondly," Marcus continued, his voice maintaining its controlled, almost mesmerizing rhythm, "it is my personal policy to record all critical business conversations, particularly those involving sensitive interactions. I have an audio recording of my entire conversation with Ms. Brenda, where she explicitly refused to recheck the system, despite being shown my Platinum Elite card, and made several disparaging remarks about my appearance and my suitability for first-class travel. You will hear her exact words, her tone, her deliberate dismissiveness." He activated the audio recording. Brenda's voice, captured with chilling fidelity, filled the boardroom, her curt, contemptuous tones echoing the very prejudice Marcus had described. Her face, already pale, now turned an ashen white, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror as she heard her own damning words. Thompson and Sterling exchanged horrified, panicked glances. The airline had strict internal policies against recording without consent, but the legal implications of such a blatant act of discrimination, now captured in incontrovertible audio, were far more damning than any breach of corporate recording policy. And finally, Marcus concluded, his voice dropping to a low, powerful register, a quiet crescendo that filled the room with palpable tension, my team, utilizing Innovate Tech's advanced data analytics and access to publicly available information, was able to access the airport security camera footage from the check-in area. It clearly shows Ms. Brenda engaging in a brief, but highly significant and conspiratorial conversation with Mr. Kevin Miller, CEO of Horizon Labs, my direct business competitor, directly before she denied my boarding. In that conversation, Mr. Miller can be seen gesturing explicitly towards me, and Ms. Brenda can be seen nodding in what appears to be enthusiastic agreement prior to her discriminatory actions. This was not a random act, it was orchestrated. He turned the tablet to display the grainy yet undeniably clear video feed onto the main screen. It showed Brenda and Kevin, a conspiratorial exchange of whispers, a subtle, almost imperceptible point in Marcus's direction from Kevin, and then Brenda's subsequent, immediate, and aggressively dismissive denial of service. The quiet strength of Marcus, his unwavering gaze, and the irrefutable multi-layered evidence he had meticulously gathered had stripped away all their defenses, exposing the ugly truth. The boardroom was utterly silent, save for the frantic, hammering beat of Brenda's heart. Marcus had not merely presented a case, he had delivered a crushing, undeniable blow, exposing not just a single prejudiced employee, but a deeper, more insidious network of malice, corporate espionage, and complicity that went straight to the heart of the airline's operations. The revelation of Kevin Miller's direct, documented involvement was the final, devastating piece of the puzzle. The phoenix tattoo on Marcus's wrist, briefly visible as he pointed to the screen with a steady hand, seemed to pulse with a silent, triumphant fire, a symbol of his unwavering resolve. The stage was set for the climax, and the executives knew, with chilling certainty, that their world was about to change. The executive boardroom, once a pristine fortress of corporate control and carefully managed narratives, had been utterly breached. The air, heavy with unspoken tension just moments before, now vibrated with the raw, undeniable force of Marcus Thorne's quiet indignation and the irrefutable weight of his meticulously gathered evidence. David Thompson, the airline's CEO, his face a mask of dawning horror, remained transfixed by the tablet displaying the damning security footage. Robert Sterling's perpetually affable smile had completely vanished, replaced by a slack-jawed shock that betrayed his utter bewilderment. Eleanor Vance, the COO, ever analytical, leaned forward, her sharp eyes missing no detail, rapidly processing the full, catastrophic implications of Kevin Miller's insidious involvement. Brenda, at the far end of the polished table, whimpered, a small, pathetic sound lost in the sudden, suffocating silence that had fallen over the room. She was a woman utterly broken, her petty reign of prejudice definitively ended. Marcus allowed the video to play for a full minute, a deliberate tactical choice. He wanted every executive in the room to absorb the silent, damning narrative in its entirety. Kevin Miller, Marcus's direct business competitor, gesturing emphatically, whispering conspiratorially, and Brenda, the airline's own representative, nodding in blatant complicity before denying Marcus his rightful seat. It was a tableau of corporate sabotage and blatant discrimination, captured with dispassionate, irrefutable clarity. The footage painted a picture that no carefully worded apology or corporate spin could ever erase. The moment of truth that would either validate Marcus's stand or condemn him to another cycle of unspoken injustice. David Thompson, struggling to regain some semblance of his executive composure, cleared his throat, his voice regaining a fraction of its former authority, though it was tinged with a desperate edge. "Mr. Thorne," he began, attempting to salvage the crumbling situation. "While this footage is undeniably concerning, it merely shows Ms. Brenda speaking with another passenger. We cannot, with all due respect, assume malicious intent from a brief interaction, however unfortunate the outcome. This still appears, from a corporate perspective, to be an isolated incident, a regrettable misunderstanding on the part of one misguided employee. The airline, as a whole, prides itself on diversity and inclusion, and we cannot be held responsible for the personal actions of one individual. He offered a strained, almost desperate smile, a last-ditch effort to minimize the damage, to protect the vast corporate entity from the impending fallout. He was trying to cast Brenda as a lone, misguided actor, a sacrificial lamb to absolve the company of any deeper systemic issues. Marcus's eyes, which had held a quiet patience and a profound understanding of human nature until now, hardened to obsidian. He knew this move, this classic corporate deflection, this attempt to sacrifice the pawn to save the queen. He would not allow it. He had anticipated this exact argument, this predictable attempt to shift blame and minimize responsibility. He raised his hand, gesturing towards the tablet, his movements precise and unhurried, a conductor preparing his orchestra for a final resounding crescendo. "Perhaps, Mr. Thompson," Marcus countered, his voice steady, carrying an undeniable weight of quiet authority. "If this were the extent of the interaction, your argument might hold water, but it is not." He paused, allowing the tension to coil tighter in the room, letting the silence amplify the anticipation. Then, with a subtle, almost imperceptible flick of his wrist, a movement so precise it seemed surgical, he activated a second layer of his presentation, zooming in on a specific detail within the security footage. The camera's digital clarity, sharpened by InnovateTech's proprietary image enhancement software, now focused with chilling precision on Brenda's hand, resting on the check-in counter. And there, with unmistakable, damning clarity, Marcus pointed to a tablet-sized screen next to Brenda's main computer terminal, which was just visible in the corner of the frame. "You see this, Mr. Thompson? This is the live flight manifest, displaying real-time seat assignments. And if you look closely at the timestamp on the screen, just seconds after Ms. Brenda's conversation with Mr. Miller, you'll observe her cursor hovering directly over my name." Marcus's voice dropped to a chillingly quiet, yet incredibly powerful crescendo, each word a hammer blow. "And then, you see her deliberately changing my confirmed first-class seat assignment to canceled, even as the system at that exact moment clearly shows multiple available seats in the first-class cabin." He zoomed in further, isolating the specific pixels, revealing the damning manipulation in agonizing detail. The digital trail, meticulously followed and cross-referenced by Sarah and her team, was irrefutable. Brenda had not merely claimed the seat was overbooked. She had actively, maliciously, created the overbooking by digitally altering Marcus's reservation. It was a direct, irrefutable act of sabotage, encouraged and instigated by Kevin Miller, designed with the sole purpose of ensuring Marcus would miss his crucial flight. The revelation hit the room like a physical shockwave. The casual, almost invisible movement of a cursor on a screen, captured on grainy security footage and then digitally enhanced, had just exposed a deep, calculated act of malice, weaving together individual prejudice and corporate espionage. As Marcus's hand, steady and precise, pointed to the incriminating pixels, the phoenix tattoo on his inner wrist, previously hidden by his sleeve, briefly flashed into view, a powerful, symbolic mark of his own relentless rebirth, his unyielding resilience, and his ultimate triumph over adversity. It was a silent, visual testament to the very strength he embodied, a strength that had risen from the ashes of past struggles. The reaction in the room was immediate and visceral, a seismic shift in the power dynamic. David Thompson's face, already pale, turned a ghastly white, then flushed with a combination of rage and profound shame. His jaw dropped, and he slumped slightly in his chair, utterly defeated, the weight of the undeniable truth crushing him. Robert Sterling gasped, a strangled sound, his perpetual smile now replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated terror. Eleanor Vance, the seasoned COO, slammed her hand on the polished table, a sharp, decisive crack that echoed through the stunned silence. Her eyes, filled with cold, professional fury, snapped to Brenda. "Brenda," she hissed, her voice low and dangerous, "is that true? Did you deliberately manipulate the system to cancel Mr. Thorne's confirmed booking?" Brenda, reduced to a trembling mess, could only stare blankly ahead, tears streaming down her face, muttering incoherent, pathetic pleas for mercy. Her body language, her utter breakdown, was an undeniable admission of guilt, a public confession in her silence. Thompson, visibly regaining a fraction of his voice, stammered, his words thick with desperation and a desperate need to contain the burgeoning crisis. "Mr. Thorne, I am deeply, profoundly sorry. This is unacceptable. This is an egregious breach of trust, an outright act of sabotage and discrimination by one of our employees. She will be dealt with immediately." He then turned to Brenda, his voice rising in an almost guttural roar, shaking with a mixture of rage and corporate fear. "Brenda, you are fired. Effective immediately. Get out of my sight." Brenda burst into desperate sobs, pleading for her job, for her future, but two stern-faced security guards who seemed to materialize out of nowhere, quietly and efficiently escorted her out of the room, her cries fading into the hushed corridor. Her face, tear-streaked and distorted by raw anguish, was a picture of utter despair and the complete, shattering realization of her downfall. She had tried to humiliate Marcus, to assert her petty power, and in doing so, had utterly destroyed herself, her own life now in shambles. But Marcus wasn't finished. He let Brenda's pathetic exit hang in the air for a moment, then turned his gaze back to Thompson, his voice firm, leaving no room for negotiation. "And Mr. Miller," he stated, his voice cutting through the lingering shock like a finely honed blade, "his involvement is now undeniable. This was not just personal prejudice on the part of an employee, it was a calculated attempt to disrupt a multi-billion-dollar business deal through corporate sabotage. That, Mr. Thompson, is corporate espionage, and it has severe legal ramifications. Innovate Tech will be pursuing every legal avenue available, not just against Ms. Brenda, but explicitly against Mr. Miller and Horizon Labs, unless your airline takes immediate, public, and decisive action against him as well. The footage proves his complicity." David Thompson scrambled for his phone, his hands trembling slightly, the weight of the crisis pressing down on him. He immediately called Kevin Miller, putting the call on speakerphone so everyone in the room could hear the unfolding disaster. Miller's voice, initially confident and dismissive, quickly descended into a stammering, terrified denial as Thompson, his voice now regaining its CEO authority, but laced with a chilling fury, laid out the irrefutable evidence and the dire consequences. "Miller!" Thompson roared into the phone, his voice shaking with a mixture of rage and desperate corporate self-preservation. "All contracts with Horizon Labs are hereby terminated, effective immediately. Furthermore, I promise you, this airline will fully assist Mr. Thorne in every possible legal action against you and your company. You will be held accountable for this corporate sabotage and the grave damage you've caused." Kevin Miller's broken, whimpering protests and frantic pleas were barely audible as Thompson slammed the phone down, severing the connection and, symbolically, Kevin's career. Kevin Miller, the smug, arrogant rival, the quintessential antagonist type A, had collapsed, his empire of deceit and corporate ruthlessness crumbling spectacularly around him. His attempt to subtly undermine Marcus had, instead, led to his own spectacular, public, and utterly deserved downfall. The remaining executives in the room, initially skeptical, defensive, and even subtly hostile, now looked at Marcus Thorne with a profound mixture of awe, newfound respect, and a dawning understanding of his true power. Their faces, once guarded and unyielding, now openly reflected admiration, even a hint of fear. They realized he was not just a successful CEO, but a formidable opponent, a man of unwavering principle who held the line against injustice, wielding evidence and strategic foresight with surgical precision. The fan unkwa nhung ngoi chung kien, the collective gasp, the terrified silence, the dawning respect, was a powerful, silent affirmation of Marcus's victory, a societal vindication that resonated deeply within the corporate microcosm of the boardroom. He had not merely won a battle, he had redefined the terms of engagement, proving that integrity, meticulous preparation, and quiet strength could dismantle even the most entrenched prejudice and the most insidious corporate malice. The legend had not just returned. It had roared to life, unmistakable and undeniable, leaving an indelible mark on everyone who witnessed its resurgence. The sudden quiet that descended upon the executive boardroom after the dramatic exit of Brenda and the thundering verbal assault on Kevin Miller was more profound than any silence before it. It was the hush of absolute shock, of shattered illusions, and of undeniable defeat for those who had underestimated Marcus Thorne. Brenda, the once haughty airline attendant, her pleas reduced to pathetic, incoherent sobs, was unceremoniously escorted out of the room by security. Her perfectly coiffed hair now disheveled, her face streaked with tears and a sickening realization. Her ignominious departure sealed her fate. Her career, built on a shaky foundation of prejudice and the petty satisfaction of wielding trivial power, was not just ended, it was utterly demolished. She would find herself swiftly blacklisted from the entire airline industry, a professional pariah among her peers, her actions serving as a stark, cautionary tale to others who might dare to wield their positions with similar disdain or discriminatory intent. Her public downfall was swift, absolute, and painfully deserved, a fitting consequence for her arrogance and deeply ingrained harmful biases. On the speakerphone, Kevin Miller's desperate, stammering protests were abruptly, mercilessly cut short as David Thompson, the airline CEO, disconnected the call with a furious, resolute slam. Thompson, his face still pale but now hardened with a cold corporate resolve, looked at the other executives around the table. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sharp, almost painful intake of breath from Robert Sterling. "Effective immediately," Thompson declared, his voice ringing with a newfound steely authority that banished all previous hesitation. "All existing contracts with Horizon Labs are terminated. Furthermore, I want our legal team to begin preparing a full dossier of cooperation. This airline will fully cooperate with Mr. Thorne and Innovate Tech in any and all legal actions they deem necessary against Mr. Miller and his company for corporate sabotage and discrimination. We will assist in every possible way to ensure he faces the full weight of the law." The news would hit the industry like a seismic event, sending shockwaves through the tightly knit world of corporate partnerships and rivalries. Kevin Miller, the cunning, ruthless rival, the quintessential antagonist, Type A, saw his carefully constructed empire crumble in real time. His calculated malice, his arrogant attempt to undermine Marcus Thorne, had backfired spectacularly, leading directly and unequivocally to his own professional ruin and severe legal repercussions that threatened to strip him of everything he had built. He would lose not just his company and its lucrative contracts, but his reputation, his standing in the cutthroat world of tech, and likely a significant portion of his personal fortune in the ensuing lawsuits. He would become a cautionary tale, a pariah in his own right, a vivid illustration of how hubris and prejudice could lead to utter annihilation. Meanwhile, Marcus Thorne, having delivered his decisive blow with surgical precision, felt a deep, cleansing sense of vindication wash over him. It wasn't triumph in the traditional outward sense, no jubilant cheer or fist pump, no public celebration. It was a calm, profound satisfaction, a quiet peace that settled deep within his core, the deep-seated contentment of justice meticulously served. David Thompson, now utterly humbled and visibly shaken by the sheer scale of the crisis Marcus had unveiled, slowly turned to Marcus, his apology sincere, deeply felt, and devoid of any corporate pretense. "Mr. Thorne," he began, his voice laced with genuine remorse, a stark contrast to his earlier defensiveness. "There are no words to express our profound regret for what you experienced today. This is inexcusable. It is a stain on our company's values, and on behalf of the entire airline, I offer our deepest, most sincere apologies. We failed you, and we will take immediate, drastic steps to rectify this." Thompson, desperate to repair the damage and prevent a PR nightmare of unprecedented proportions that could cripple his airline, extended an olive branch, not merely a superficial one, but one of genuine, substantial opportunity. "We would be incredibly honored, Mr. Thorne," he continued, his voice earnest, "if you would consider joining our advisory board. We desperately need your insight, your perspective, your unwavering commitment to fairness, to ensure such prejudice never again taints our service, never again infiltrates our ranks. And beyond that, as a gesture of our commitment to change and to preventing any recurrence, we would like to offer Innovate Tech a comprehensive, long-term strategic partnership, beginning with a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract for your cutting-edge AI-powered training software. We want to completely overhaul our employee sensitivity and customer service protocols, leveraging your expertise to build a truly inclusive environment from the ground up." He was offering not just atonement, but a future-proof solution, an acknowledgement of Marcus's unparalleled expertise. Marcus listened patiently, his expression thoughtful, a subtle shift in his gaze indicating deep consideration. He politely, but firmly, declined the advisory board position, recognizing it as a token gesture, a symbolic appeasement that wouldn't truly address the systemic issues. However, the offer for a strategic partnership, particularly one explicitly focused on using InnovateTech's advanced technology to proactively identify and combat discrimination within the sprawling airline structure, resonated deeply with his personal mission, his core values. He saw a tangible, unparalleled chance to turn a deeply personal affront into a broad, systemic change, to implement real solutions rather than mere apologies. He envisioned InnovateTech's AI as a powerful tool to detect implicit biases, to train employees in cultural competency, and to ensure equitable treatment for every passenger, regardless of their appearance or perceived status. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Thompson," Marcus responded, his tone firm but measured, conveying both acceptance and a clear set of conditions. "While I won't join the advisory board, I am willing to oversee the implementation of InnovateTech's software. This is not about retribution. It's about ensuring that no one else has to endure what I did today. It's about building a system that fosters genuine respect and understanding, driven by data and accountability. We can create that system together." Thompson, visibly relieved and immensely impressed by Marcus's pragmatism and commitment to actionable solutions, nodded enthusiastically, a genuine light of hope appearing in his eyes. This was more than a significant new opportunity for Marcus. It was a profound vindication, leveraging his influence and his company's groundbreaking technology to initiate tangible, lasting positive change across an entire, highly influential industry. The multi-billion-dollar London deal, now officially signed with a renewed sense of profound purpose and a deeper meaning, felt even more significant, a powerful testament to the fact that justice and prosperity could, and should, go hand in hand. Hours later, high above the churning, vast expanse of the Atlantic Ocean, the soft, almost imperceptible hum of Marcus's state-of-the-art private jet was the only sound in the plush, expansive cabin. Sarah, his indispensable assistant, sat across from him, her posture finally relaxed, a laptop resting on her knees as she reviewed the finalized London contract, its digital signature now securing InnovateTech's monumental leap forward. The profound relief in her posture was palpable, a mirror to Marcus's own internal calm. "You really did it, Marcus," Sarah said, a quiet awe in her voice that transcended mere professional admiration. "You took what could have been a colossal humiliation, a significant business risk, a potential career setback, and you transformed it into a monumental, industry-altering victory. I've never, in all my years, seen anyone accomplish something so profound, so utterly decisive from such a disadvantaged position." Marcus gazed out at the endless, ethereal expanse of clouds stretching to the horizon, a contemplative look etched on his face. The setting sun painted the sky in hues of fiery orange and soft violet, a breathtaking canvas of serene beauty. "It wasn't just a victory, Sarah," he responded, his voice soft, reflective, yet imbued with an underlying strength. "It was a stark, undeniable reminder that we must never, ever back down from injustice, no matter how subtle or overt. It's about protecting our own dignity, yes, but more importantly, it's about paving the way for those who come after us. It's about ensuring that a young black man or woman, or indeed anyone from any marginalized background, doesn't get denied what they've earned, doesn't get mistreated, simply because someone in a position of power has a preconceived notion about who they are or where they belong. It's about dismantling those notions, brick by brick." He paused, then added, his gaze returning to the cabin, meeting Sarah's earnest eyes. "Every step of my journey, from the humble beginnings, symbolized by this worn-out watch on my wrist, to the phoenix tattoo that marks my skin, has been about overcoming obstacles, about rising from difficult circumstances. Today was just another battle in a much larger, ongoing war for equity and respect. But it's a war we must keep fighting, diligently, strategically, not just for ourselves, but for the principle of justice itself, for the fundamental right of every individual to be treated with dignity." He recognized, with a profound sense of clarity, that the struggle for fairness, far from being a burden, was an essential, defining part of his own growth, a continuous affirmation of his identity and his purpose in the world. The quiet man who had entered the airport that morning, facing prejudice and potential ruin, was irrevocably transformed, not by anger or resentment, but by the unwavering power of his own integrity, his strategic brilliance, and his ultimate undeniable influence. He had found his new calm, a profound sense of peace born from decisive action and a greater purpose. 3 years later, the name Marcus Thorne resonated far beyond the confines of the tech industry. Innovate Tech, under his visionary and increasingly influential leadership, had expanded into a truly global empire, not merely dominating the software market, but also pioneering cutting-edge AI solutions for incredibly diverse industries, including aviation, healthcare, education, and even environmental conservation. Marcus, despite his immense, almost unimaginable wealth and the burgeoning scale of his influence, remained remarkably true to his understated roots. His penthouse, still minimalist in its design, served as a quiet sanctuary from the constant global clamor that now accompanied his every move. He still made his own coffee each morning, still woke before dawn for his solitary, disciplined workouts, and still preferred the comfort of unbranded casual clothes when not in a high-stakes boardroom or delivering a keynote address. But the impact of his life, once a quiet ripple, had amplified exponentially, becoming a powerful wave of change that touched countless lives. His accumulated wealth, once primarily a means of personal security and financial independence, had fundamentally transformed into a powerful engine for broad, systemic societal change. Marcus established the Thorne Equity Fund, a colossal non-profit philanthropic arm directly funded by Innovate Tech's unprecedented success. The fund was dedicated to two primary, interconnected missions. First, investing in and nurturing small businesses founded by minority entrepreneurs, providing crucial seed capital, strategic mentorship, and invaluable networking opportunities where traditional financial avenues often failed to reach. And second, financing large-scale legal projects specifically aimed at combating systemic discrimination across various sectors of society. He became, almost inadvertently, a global icon of justice and equality, a living testament to the profound power of leveraging one's platform and resources for significant social good. His quiet resistance, sparked by a singular act of prejudice, had blossomed into a mighty, undeniable movement, inspiring countless others to seek fairness and challenge injustice. Marcus dedicated a significant, often unpublicized portion of his time to actively paying it forward. He regularly delivered captivating keynote speeches at prestigious universities, international conferences, and community forums, drawing immense crowds eager to hear his insights. He would recount, with compelling honesty, his journey from humble beginnings to global influence, emphasizing the critical importance of resilience, integrity, and unwavering self-belief in the face of adversity. He wasn't just a speaker, he was a mentor, a guide, a beacon. He mentored countless young students and aspiring entrepreneurs, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds who faced similar barriers to those he had once overcome. He shared not just shrewd business acumen and technological foresight, but invaluable life lessons on perseverance, the subtle art of negotiation, and the enduring power of ethical leadership. The story of the Black CEO denied a first-class seat had, over these 3 years, transcended mere news or anecdote. It had become an urban legend, a widely shared parable of injustice overcome, a powerful, inspiring narrative that resonated deeply with anyone who had ever faced adversity, discrimination, or simply felt undervalued. He became a trusted advisor, a quiet force, a powerful source of hope for a new generation eager to carve their own paths in a world still grappling with inequities. One quiet evening, as the last sliver of the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in breathtaking hues of fiery orange, soft rose, and deep violet, Marcus sat alone in the spacious, exquisitely appointed cabin of his private jet. The aircraft soared silently through the vast, inky expanse of the night sky, its twin engines humming a barely perceptible lullaby. He was en route to an international summit where he was scheduled to deliver the opening address on the critical importance of equity in emerging technologies. He gazed out the panoramic window, watching the distant stars shimmer like scattered diamonds against the velvet blackness, a profound sense of peace settling over him. On his left wrist, the old, unbranded wristwatch remained, its worn face a constant, tactile connection to his humble beginnings, a physical reminder of the journey he had traversed. Its very simplicity spoke volumes of a life lived by principles, not possessions. Occasionally, as he shifted his hand, the ambient, soft light from the cabin would catch the subtle, almost hidden outline of the phoenix tattoo on his inner wrist, its stylized wings forever unfurled in perpetual ascent. It was his private symbol, a mark of the fires he had survived, the countless times he had risen from ashes, stronger and more purposeful. He smiled faintly, a profound, contented smile that reached his eyes, crinkling the corners just so. He was no longer just the man who had been unjustly scorned at an airport check-in counter. He was a living legend, a global force for positive change, a guiding light for the oppressed, and an undeniable testament to the enduring power of resilience, strategic foresight, and unwavering justice. The profound indignity he had faced years ago, far from breaking him or fostering bitterness, had been the crucible that forged his ultimate purpose, leading him not just to unprecedented personal success and financial prosperity, but to a profound, wide-reaching, and impactful legacy. He had found his second spring, a season not merely of personal affluence and professional triumph, but of boundless influence, widespread inspiration, and an unwavering, deep-seated commitment to shaping a more just and equitable world for all. His story, a testament to quiet strength, the dismantling of prejudice, and ultimate triumph over adversity, would continue to inspire, forever etched into the annals of progress, a powerful narrative for generations to come. If Marcus's story has stirred your heart and reminded you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment below. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining the journey.